Thank you. Welcome to this evening's Northants Planning Committee North meeting today, Wednesday the 4th of October 2023. Welcome to everyone and members of the public. I'll just run through a few housekeeping rules, please. If we could request that mobile phones are either set to silent or switched on for the duration of the meeting. I'll introduce speakers by name and prior to them speaking, and members of the public, if you'd like to come and speakers sit in front there. First of all, I'll ask the officer to introduce and update any updates on the reports, and then I'll call for speakers in order on the speaker list to come and speak. We'll then go have a member debate, and we'll seek a proposer and seconder for any recommendation, and we'll make a vote on any proposals. So that if we go on to agenda item 1, apologies for non-attendance.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Carter, Councillor Sims, Councillor Riley, Councillor Shacklock and Councillor Watts, with Councillors Buckingham, Councillor Armour, Councillor Jelly and Councillor Addison acting as substitutes tonight. Thank you.
And thank you for all those subs turning up. Thank you. Agenda item 2, members' declarations of interest. Are there any? Councillor Dell.
Thank you, Chair. I used to work for a company that installed the phone system for JME, but I haven't worked for them for well over a year now. So I just wanted to register that as a declaration of interest.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've had a chat. I'm very happy that Councillor Dell carries on and stays in the meeting. Apparently, not only has he stopped working for that company, he's changed career, so he's about as far removed from JME as he could be in relation to all of this. But that was then and this is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of September. It does say in your papers, I believe, the 2nd of August, but it is the 6th of September. Do I have a proposer? Thank you. Councillor Marks. Seconder? Councillor Armour. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. So that leads us on to agenda item 4, applications for planning permission, listed building consent and appeal information. First item on the agenda is November Charlie /23 /00041 Romeo Victor Charlie 106. It's at Little Stanion Development in Corby. And I believe, Bob, you're going to give us an introduction on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, just in terms of housekeeping, we've asked the tree officer to do a visit to look at the landscaping. I'll bring that plan up in a few minutes. And there are some issues there which officers will be discussing with the tree officer and the applicants, notwithstanding the application this evening. Apart from that, there was a 2nd of October letter from Gately Legal to the solicitor, which I think has been, I'm not sure if that's been circulated, in response to various aspects of the 106 agreement. Chair, do you want me to carry on? Yeah. Chair, members, before I do the presentation, just want to take you through some key issues here. First one is the application involves a variation to a modified Section 106 agreement when Silent Pride Limited, probably heard of them, were in receivership. Now, this matter is very complex and there's 3 elements to it. One is planning, legal, and the viability issues. And my colleague to my right, Chris White, will deal with those, and solicitor will deal with the legal aspects. Planning permission has already been granted for the final phases of the residential development, and the village square is subject to a minor amendment with the council at the moment. It's not very significant, and there are some issues with that. Building E is the community hall, which, as the manager of Corby Anthraps, and I've been very keen to ensure that that is a priority for officers from when I took on the case, including the football pitch, and that has already been delayed. It should have been constructed in 2020. Now, the applicant is seeking to remove 2 obligations which are itemised in the report in front of you today. And on that basis, if those are removed, then subject to a time span, they can construct the community building with a parking area. There has been some discussions about the football pitch, and I think that might be for another time. Viability consultant Chris White is attending to set out the viability issues in the second part of the PowerPoint presentation. The viability issues are key in this case, and the reason why the applicant is seeking to modify the agreement, as mentioned with the 2 obligations. Legal services will also be available to advise members upon the legal options in this case once the debate is concluded. Members, if I can direct you to paragraph 2.1 of the committee report, that identifies the 2 planning obligations, basically a roof tax and a profit share. Those are the 2 obligations that the applicant wishes to remove from the the modified agreement. Also, in terms of, if you agree with the applicant's option, then I would say that what we're looking at is recommend A, which is where the funds will be up front. In order to safeguard the council's position, because there is a risk that the community hall is never built. As I said earlier, they've already been delayed by 3 years. So we are seeking, looking at the terms of a modified agreement, and we also do have concerns. We have a recommendation A and a recommendation B. Since the time of writing this report, the applicant suggested that the company would arrange an insurance bond of 1.2 million. I think that would have to be index linked to cover the costs of the community hall, but only effective from 2 years from the date of the modified agreement. With the phasing agreement under Appendix F that you've seen, it's attached to the report, you see that the developer is looking to complete in 2028. So there is a risk that the community hall may be delayed or not built at all, depending on the applicant's financial situation. Officers can only respond verbally as yet in respect to the insurance bond, which has only been introduced recently, but it is commonly used in the construction industry. It will be necessary for members to take legal advice from the council's solicitor, and also important, my colleague to my right here, on the viability issues. To conclude, on recommendation A is paragraph 1.1 to 1.4. If members are not content with that option, then the recommendation is B for refusal.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Shall I carry on with the PowerPoint, or you?
I'm happy. Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair, members. This is I'll just go through the presentation, give you some background, and my colleague will then deal with the viability. So I've already mentioned that this is a variation of a modified agreement. There are existing planning permissions in place, so you're not debating the question of whether permission has been required or not. Planning permission has been granted. Your focus should be on the 2 obligations that I've already mentioned. The final phases of this development will be 99 dwellings plus some development within the village centre. I don't know if you can see my mouse here. That's the village centre. This is the main residential development. If I move on. This shows the development in more detail. This shows the landscaped area that I mentioned earlier that our tree officer is actually now looking into in some detail. to ensure compatibility with the master plan and the micro plans. This is the village centre, and this is the main residential development, which hasn't been constructed. There are elements within this building here which I will amplify. This is the wider plan showing the development. I think probably a move on from that. This is the landscape plan that I've mentioned earlier. The tree officer does have some issues with that. There has been some progress made, but I think there will be further checks on site to make sure that the master plan and the micro plans are complied with. And that's obviously notwithstanding your decision this evening. This shows the village square. The building that obviously I've been focusing on really to ensure that that is built and delivers a community facility and use for the residents, which now will be probably approaching 1,000 by the time the development's finished. This hasn't been built, has a parking area next to it. There's another building here I mentioned earlier where the developer wants to make some changes. We do have some concerns on fire safety grounds, removing stairs and lifts, etc. So these two buildings at the top are constructed, and this building is the one we're talking about in terms of the community asset. This is the village hall, the floor plan and the parking area. It's 400 square metres. It's quite an innovative design, probably a little bit more expensive than a traditional, with slightly different pitch roofs, but that has got planning permission. So in terms of the key issues here, it's emission of the roof tax. That's actually 11k per unit, so that would be quite a sizable sum. And that was, the idea was to reimburse the public purse to the primary school that was funded by the county council, and the county council was never reimbursed. Also, emission of a 34% profit share. Difficult to predict exactly what that would be. My colleague might be able to help members with that. As I mentioned earlier, there's an extended period for completion of the house building phase, which is 2028. So it's quite a sizable period of time. And if that does follow through, and the building was built in, the community building was built in 2028, that will be nearly 8 years after the intended construction completion. The applicant has agreed to construct the village hall and parking area, but obviously there are provisos. There's some discussion going on about the football pitch because they're saying there's a multiple use games area, which, but we feel they should be providing the football pitch in it as well. I've recommended in my report that the council could take on the land, but subject to a full payment, and that's in the first stages of my report. But that might be a step too far for the applicant, but that's really be the safest way, that we have the funds, we have the land, and then we have a degree of control over the timing of the village hall construction. So the recommendation on A is to approve taking into account the NPPF, actually this should be 2023 now, apologise, it's come in recently, the viability statements from the applicant and the council's viability assessor. There's a need for enforceability in order to deliver the village hall and football pitch. So the key changes are, I'm sure if you can see clearly, but there's the 11k roof tax and then there's the profit share. There are some elements of the village centre which need to be finished, but I would say the development is probably 85% complete. I just want to hand over to my colleague now, Chris White, to talk through the viability issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, just use that to go down that way.
Right, I've got a couple of slides which sort of introduce viability first of all, just so that people understand what can and can't be allowed in viability. And then I'll start running through the process which we went through to determine how viable or unviable the application was. I'm quite happy to take questions on some of these details because I know viability can be quite complicated in concept. So I'm happy to be interrupted if you want me to be interrupted.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically, viability is set out in policy guidance in the PPG, and there are sort of rules of engagement effectively. Benchmark assumptions have to be made. But it's all about a balance between cost values and a balance between Section 106 contributions the council require and return to the developer and land value to the landowner. That's basically what is the basis of viability assessments through policy. That runs through whether you're looking at it from a planning point of view, where contribution should be realistic, not compromise sustainability, or if you're looking at it from the property point of view through the RICS, where they talk about return to developer and willing receipts to landowners and profits. So all these are effectively aimed to be balanced when you look at the numbers of the scheme. So in terms of Little Stanion, this has been an historically difficult site. I think I first got involved in looking at viability of this site back in, I think it was about 2016. So this isn't sort of a unique sort of situation because it's happened. And it was also happening on schemes in and around, I remember doing the Ben Bailey scheme back in 2014. So this has been a consistent issue on this site. The financial viability has to be undertaken on current day assumptions. So you look at what the values are today, you look at what the costs are today, and you're not supposed to look at any special circumstances. So you shouldn't really look at the applicant. You need to do generic assumptions and benchmarking. So in terms of the process I went through, the values, basically viability is the revenue you receive minus the cost it takes to build. It's quite simple in that theory. So in terms of the values for the applicant, they're based on previous sales, so they're all comparable to what is actually happening on the ground. I did actually uplift them a little in relation to what was being marketed on the web. The commercial values of the scheme are reasonable in terms of the assumptions. In terms of the land value, it's quite important to note that there isn't a land value assumed in the applicant's appraisal. So they haven't said this is what we must have for the land and fixed it in the appraisal. The appraisal is structured to say, well, how much have you got left to pay for land? And they've actually foregone the land value in this instance because the appraisal doesn't actually allow them to have one, although the NPPF says they should have one. The build costs are reasonable for the size of development that they are. They're a smaller developer, applicant who doesn't get benefit of economies of scale that the big developers have. And the commercial costs, I basically lowered those because I thought they were too expensive. And then in terms of the other costs in the appraisals, externals are basically everything that's not in the house. So there's the garden, there's the fence, it's half the road. For housing schemes, they tend to be 10 to 15%. So they're at the base, they're at the bottom of the range here, 10%. I also lowered it relative to the apartments. So the cost in the appraisal for externals is basically as low as it can be. Contingency, I lowered to 3.5%. That's as low as it can be. The fees were standard. The finance costs were 6.25%, which in today's terms is actually quite low. As you're all aware, finance costs have gone up. The profit was lowered from the maximum allowance of 20% to 19%, so there's been a reduction in there, and the commercials at 15%. So the reason for going through that was to say that the assumptions which have been made in the independent analysis of the appraisal are all either reasonable or on the lower end of reasonableness. There's nothing in there which you could assume the developer's getting above average allowances on. The big item that was queried was obviously the costs related to the village hall and the infrastructure. The applicant replied on the infrastructure assumptions, and basically we went through all of the rates that were assumed. Where they were too high, they were cut. On the village hall, there were 3 options for the costings assumed, and in my appraisal I didn't allow any additional cost for the village hall, although they're now offering, I think it was something like £750,000 in the appraisal, and they've offered 1.2 million in terms of the indexed extra cost for the appraisal, for the village hall, sorry. So again, relative to the appraisal, that's a reasonable position to take. And if if I move on. This was just really an indication for you of how unviable this scheme was. So having gone through the appraisal inputs and assumptions and demonstrated that they're either on par with benchmark or at the lower end of benchmarks, you can see all the red numbers in the right-hand column, which is the results of the viability assessment, which are all minus figures. The only time the appraisal gets to a positive number, which is in theory, that's when it's viable, is if you discount the Section 106 on the policy side, and you also don't take into account the land value. So the only conclusion that the independent study can come to that it is unviable effectively in terms of the policy allowance. In terms of land value, the applicant can choose whether to forego their allowance on land, but from an MPPF point of view, I should be insisting it's in there. So in terms of securing obligations, as I understand it, the village hall, the community building, the school playing field, and then from a viability point of view, the applicant is committing to delivery of the item. I think the issue there is the trigger date and the completion date. And then the question is, in terms of funding and delivery, what is the equitable timing for the money to be spent in relation to the appraisal cash flow? And when does the land get transferred? And what do you do in terms of securing certainty on delivery of the obligations? So in terms of the money's in the appraisal. The question is, how do you get certainty that it's delivered within the programme timetable? And that's the point I'll end on.
Thank you. Councillor Best, I was just going to ask if members had any questions.
Yeah, sorry, just some clarification. The viability study you've done there, does that relate to the whole of the development historically and the last phase, or does it relate just to this last proposed phase only?
I believe it's the whole scheme. I'll just double check the number of units. I think the focus is on comparables of the previous being used for the balance of the remaining. I'm just trying to remember if we've got a comprehensive set of all the unit numbers. There's 180 units in the appraisal, so would that be, how many parcels would that cover? 180 units. That's the remaining plus some of the built.
It's 99 plus 15.
Yeah.
Plus
I think it's definitely all of the remainder and some of the buildings, some of the units being completed.
cover the whole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yes, 935. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
saying about the next phase. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's some of the units are already in here being completed, but not all of them.
Okay, thanks.
Really, I'm very grateful that Councillor Addington's here, because I think you and I are the only people who go back this. Addison is here because I think you and I are the only people who go back this far. Because I actually drafted the 2006 agreement, makes me feel really old. And obviously, Councillor Addison's done a far better in staying younger than I have. But yes, I mean the numbers on the overall 106 with Silent Pride were way above 180.
Yeah.
Nearer to 1,000, if I remember rightly.
Any other questions at this point? Time? No. Okay, in that case, I'll call the speakers forward. Ray Killam. If you want to start speaking when I give you the nod, we'll just wait for Callum to get back.
Oh, good.
Thank you. And you have 3 minutes. Are you ready to time? Thank you. Oh, I think it's not quite ready.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. In respect to the money owed for the primary school, the roof tax and the 34% uplift, this is public money. It belongs to every resident in Little Stanion and the rest of the residents in North Northamptonshire. Your predecessors, Northamptonshire County Council, thankfully blocked the decision of Corby Borough Council to waive the school debt. So what is different today? The debt was reported back in May 2021. Since then, the cost of building materials and subcontract labour has rocketed out of all proportion. So have interest rates, so have loans, so have mortgages. So, if JME pleads poverty now, it's even worse back than in 2021. His deficit is even greater. This developer in the past has made some fantastic planning applications that look good on paper. They were approved. They were slowly but surely then puts in planning application amendments to change regulations, not once but umpteen times on several buildings. The result, the community is left with S106 amendments that barely reflect the original applications. Examples, CCTV, cycle paths, soccer pitches, multi-use games area, and now the threat of not building the village hall. And you know the proviso of that demand is made clearly in the report. The village hall was agreed in the S106 with CBC back on the 21st of May 2018 and should have been begun within 3 years of that date, and it should have been delivered to the village in 20/21. Here we are now, in excess of 5 years of that date, without a start being made. It is a known fact that on a number of occasions the developer, via his agent, misled Corby Borough Council's Planning Committee with incorrect or fictitious information. May I please ask you to consider this? If the committee is mindful to vote to let this developer off the money he owes, I sincerely hope you're not, may I make a possible compromise suggestion? The compromise is that NNC appoints an assessor at JME's expense to assess the true up-to-date build cost of the village hall. JME is then given relief of this cost by way of a credit when the building is complete and its contents are handed over to the parish council to manage. The only condition I will propose is that if JME is to start building immediately or within 30 days from the date you have stipulated in your excellent report, that you put a stop notice on the build. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any councillors have any questions of Mr Killam? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Stuart Nash from Little Stanion Parish Council. Again, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Right, thank you. The long-running saga of the Little Stanion development. Little Stanion Parish Council would like to thank the NNC officers for producing the report and recommendations in front of you. They have made, they have made considerable effort to understand the complex history as well as the nature of the current developer. Suitable community facilities are very badly needed for our large and fantastic community. There have been many false starts and broken promises in our community's history. At the very start of the development, the four maiden builders paid a total of £9 million into a Section 106 account. Before the first resident moved in September 2008, £6 million had been withdrawn and never replaced. Between 2007 and 2010, the four-stage payments for the primary school and similarly for the community centre were never paid. In 2013, the lead development company, Silent Pride, came under the control of James Moore, now JME Developments Limited. Silent Pride was immediately put into administration as the company's bankers did not have confidence that the £6 million shortfall in the Section 106 account could be made up. In 2016, JME stated that they had a viable scheme and would be able to provide the promised community facilities. In order to produce this viable scheme, a number of concessions were made in order to allow extra houses to be built and to reduce the Section 106 commitments. In the 2016 phasing plan, construction was to start October 2018 and completed by January 2022. Now it is to continue to late 2028 at the very least. A 4-year build has increased to 10 years plus. In a 2017 planning application, the football pitch and changing rooms disappeared. In a 2018 planning application, it was stated that Village Hall would be completed by May 2020. It has never been started. We would like to point out that Recommendation A makes no mention of the multi-use games area for Mugger. This seems to have now disappeared and the football pitch seems to have reappeared. Suitable community facilities are very badly needed for our large and fantastic community. We feel that Recommendation A has a lot to commend it and urge you to approve this recommendation. Little Stanion Parish Council would welcome the opportunity to work with the NNC officers to ensure Recommendation A delivers for community facilities. Very precise and specific conditions are required. The fine details will determine the chances of Recommendation A achieving its very worthy aims. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? No. Thank you very much. Councillor Christopher Horseman. Again, you've got 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. Chris Horseman, Little Stanion Parish Council. How would you feel if you'd been waiting for 5 years for something ultra special, and today is the day when the decision is made to settle this JME-created fiasco? That's how the residents of Little Stanion, especially us 9 councillors, feel today. We're dying to hear if our dream is about to come true and that you will back us. Mr. Moore is a really nice gentleman, but sadly, his advisors have given us too many unfulfilled promises, untruths, excuses, and as you've just heard, unfulfilled promises. And a lot of planning applications. You might not know Little Stanion very well, some of you, but your officers do, and I'm certain these words will ring true with them. Some time ago, we learnt in documentation that they would only build the village hall if he's let off a big public purse debt, the ones my colleagues have alluded to. Might you have naughty thoughts? Would you say that's tantamount to blackmail? Because we would. Do you? Do you share our opinion on that point? Is there a trade-off? You just heard from Ray Killam that he's offered one suggestion. Maybe you have some other ideas in order to get the land developed as soon as possible. We think it's high time JME honoured their obligations. No more ifs, no more buts, no more excuses, no more amendments to plans, and no more threats not to build, something that we should have some 3 years ago. If you decide this evening that the village hall must be built, we're keen to learn the timescales you will demand and that he'll promise to keep, and importantly, what you will do if the promise isn't fulfilled. Also, your decision on who will manage the village hall. We hope it's the parish council. We've already finished most of the strategic business plan that your council has requested. If you agree that the parish hall, if you agree that the parish council manages it, you will also impose a decision, I hope, on the provision of the village hall's furnishers and fittings. Finally, are you concerned at the sudden emergence of other companies managing parts of Little Stanion? Is that strange?
Councillor Horseman, can you wrap up, please? Your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, just thanks to Bob Young and Troy Healy and their colleagues for sharing all this information with us, and we hope you'll find in our favour. And also you'll have a chance to read Tom Pursglove's documentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benjamin Darling, again from Little Stanion Parish Council.
Good evening. Thanks for letting me speak today. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Northamptonshire County Council, today I stand before you as a concerned father, a husband, a frustrated resident and a dedicated councillor who has committed my time and to ensure that the neighbours of my community have the facilities they rightfully deserve. Additionally, I stand before you as a person with a mobility disability, relying on local amenities, paved pathways and well-maintained residences. Little Stanion is a young and promising community, and it has languished in a state of neglect for far too long. After the completion of the developer's current project, Little Stanion will be home to over 1,000 houses, housing an average of more than 3,000 residents, and these individuals, our friends and our neighbours, rightfully deserved the amenities that were promised to them. For over a decade, the village residents have endured numerous false starts, as mentioned before, construction delays, unfulfilled promises, and to this day, quite frankly, Little Stanion still looks like a building site. Northamptonshire Council, Little Stanion Parish Council and the residents have made considerable concessions to support the developer in addressing their claimed viability challenges. Regrettably, the developer has not reciprocated these efforts by delivering on the many promises. I ask that you recognise the importance of Recommendation A, and I extend your approval for this. The proposed facilities are not just a want but a necessity for our thriving and sizable population to reinvigorate Little Stanion and put in an end date to restore our village to the vibrant community it deserves to be. Thank you for your time, and I believe we can work together towards fulfilling the aspirations of the Little Stanion community and rectify a history of unmet promises with Recommendation A, which will accomplish this. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I call Mark Flatman, please, agent for the applicant? Likewise, you've got 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to contextually elaborate upon my letter, that is Officer Report Appendix A. 3 planning permissions were granted in 2018, as required by the 2016 Section 106A modification. 17-00701 approved the structural landscaping and play areas for Little Stanion. 17-00702 approved 4 blocks totalling 66 apartments, retail units and the village hall within the village centre. Finally, 17-00703 granted outline planning permission for between 99 and 135 dwellings to be split between parcels 5 and 6. In 2019, reserved matters approval was granted for 15 dwellings on parcel 6. These have all now been constructed. In 2020, reserved matters was then granted for 99 dwellings on parcel 5. Construction has commenced, but no dwellings are yet complete. 22 apartments of Block C in the village centre are yet to commence, but Blocks A, B and D are complete. A Tesco's opened in the spring. Parcels 5 and 6 will deliver 114 dwellings, and with the 66 village centre apartments, a total of 180 dwellings will be delivered in completing Little Stanion. JME have also provided a 32-space car park south of the school to assist parents at school times. Work commenced on the structural landscaping and equipped play areas in the winter of 2018. Visiting the site reveals all is now complete except for the Mugger multi-use games area and play area to the south of the lake. Tonight's committee report does not clarify that the Mugger was substituted for the football pitch. Paragraphs 7.12 to 7.14 of the 15th of May 2018 report to 17-00701. Within that CBC committee report, it confirms that JME did not own all the football pitch land,
so the mugger was accepted by CBC in lieu of the football pitch previously sought under the 2016 Section 106 modification. Mr Moore, the owner of JME Developments, will speak after me to explain why it is not physically possible to construct the mugger and play area within the 3-month timescale suggested at recommendation 3 of the paragraph 1.4 of tonight's committee report. Thank you for listening to me. I'll now hand over to Mr Moore, unless you've got any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions from members? No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I'll call upon Mr Moore. I've got you down as the agent for the applicant. Yes. Oh, yes. Again, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. JME are fully committed to progressing the build-out of Little Stanion. Mark is right, a lot has been achieved, but it has been a difficult journey. When Little Stanion came out of administration in August 2017, the company had suffered cash losses as a result in the order of £1 million. A viability assessment for JME in spring of 2019 showed that Little Stanion could not afford the Section 106 obligations the administrator had agreed to. Corby Borough Council, after having sought expert advice, agreed with the viability assessment. Corby Borough Council confirmed their agreement to JME by letter of the 20th of December 2019. Northamptonshire County Council opposed it despite the experts' advice. This 4-year gap since 2019, including the effects of COVID, have not only caused delay but have seen increases in build costs, funding costs, together with mortgage rates which have impacted sales. Despite this, JME were successful in getting the sewers and drains, street lighting and a proportion of the roads adopted. In regard to the open spaces, JME injected funds to enable an early delivery of the paths and play areas, and all that remains to be constructed is one play area and the mugger referred to in the report. In the report, we are asked to build the mugger within 3 months. Corby Council approved a mugger in place of the football pitch back in 2018, so it's the approved mugger we assume is meant. Presently, there are 2 reasons why we cannot build the mugger. Firstly, there is a foul pipe which may need upgrading, which runs through the footprint of the mugger. Secondly, due to the sloping nature of the site, there is a permitted retaining wall required by highways to deal with any slippage and support the road within Parcel 5. Having regard to health and safety and working space, this retaining wall would need to be constructed prior to the mugger and the nearby play area. The Council now has its own expert who agrees that without removing the roof tax in the current S106 agreement, the development is not viable. To enable the building work to continue so we can deliver the new community building and the mugger, I would kindly ask the committee to support our application and return the development to a viable position. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? I've got Councillor Best.
Yes, sir. Can you just clarify who is currently the legal owner of the land on which the last phase of the development, I think parcels 5 and 6, is going to be built? Do JME themselves actually own the land currently?
Yes, JME own it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Deering.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Can I just clarify, seems a bit of a confusion here about a mugger and a football pitch. Are you actually saying that you can do the mugger if the timing is right, but you're not doing the football pitch, or you are doing the football pitch and not the mugger, or both? No, it is only the mugger that we are doing. The original football pitch we were trying to do, there was part of the land that was owned by Tata Steel, and they wouldn't sell us the land to build the football pitch. So it was decided that the mugger, being an all-weather games area with a hard stand underneath it that would be able to be used for 12 months of the year, was a much better solution. And the officers at Corby agreed with that at that particular time.
So can I just be clear? You're saying you're not doing the football pitch?
No,
Right, thank you.
but we are doing the mugger.
Right. That's just, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from members? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Robert Waite, the agent for the applicant. Thank you. Again, likewise, you've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Mark confirmed the planning progress that has been made at Little Stanion, and James has explained the economic problem which is now stalling the development. The application can resolve that. It's not a planning application. All the planning permissions already exist. It would only change the wording of the existing legal agreement to make the development viable again. The Planning Act says that if a legal agreement would continue to serve a useful purpose equally well after the proposed amendments are made, then the application should be approved. So that's the test in the statute. The amendments proposed would remove the roof tax. The council's own expert has assessed that the development isn't viable if the roof tax remains. The site would then have to be mothballed, the community building couldn't be funded or built, and the roof tax wouldn't be paid anyway because the trigger points under the agreement would never be reached. No more roofs, no roof tax. The good news is the experts also agree that if the application is approved, the development can still fund the community building. There's a legal commitment to provide it within 2 years of the development being financially viable. That's not being diluted or changed in anything this application proposes. And the applicant also agrees, as per recommendation A, that the site can be transferred to the council and that if it's not built within 2 years, some further financial security would be provided. So the only one of the council's requirements, recommendation A, which can't be met, is the time frame for the multi-use games area. And Mr. Moore gave the reasons, but the same commitment to deliver within 2 years of an approval of the application could apply to that as with the community building. It was the county council that imposed the roof tax, and it did that to reimburse it for the primary school that opened 10 years ago. Corby agreed with the applicant that the development wasn't viable with the roof tax back in 2019, but the county did not agree. So as the new unitary authority, members have got the chance to speak with one voice now and to unlock the situation so the rest of the development can go ahead. There's nothing controversial in detail between the parties, so if you can support the application, I'd look forward to working with the council solicitor to agree the wording and get the development back on track. But positive support this evening would be vital for that. And thank you then for listening to Mr. Flatman, Mr. Moore and myself, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? No? Thank you very much. I think the council solicitor would like to address members as well.
I think that's been helpful to listen to the various representations made by the various parties. As our last speaker indicated, this is not about whether planning permission should be granted. That happened a long time ago when my hair was a slightly darker colour than it is now, so I do remember it well. At that time, and I remember at that time, and I say this as much as I can to Little Stanion residents and the councillors from the parish council, the climate was incredibly different then than it has been and is now. We were doing things like profit sharing. There's a profit sharing provision built into this clause. You wouldn't get sight nor sound of a profit sharing clause in a 106. Now, it simply wouldn't happen because of where we are in terms of finances. So I do fully understand why that is very much up for debate. I also recall that back in 2006, the county council, and apologies to any county councillors or former county councillors who are here then, were obsessed, frankly, with roof taxes. Everything had to have a roof tax on it. So actually, an £11,000 roof tax back in 2006 was weirdly quite reasonable. It isn't now. The reality of some of those elements is that they simply won't stack up in terms of viability for a project like this going forward to completion. But it does raise very difficult issues, which fortunately I think will be dealt with, and I think assurances can be given to Stanion and Little Stanion in terms of the provision of education facilities, bearing in mind your relative distance from the rest of the Corby Borough community. You're slightly out on the edge there. My understanding is that those are being addressed, they've been dealt with. This was really a payback. Those two probably aren't the big issues for us. The big issues for us, and always has been, because it was there right at the beginning, there needed to be a community facility for Little Stanion. The welcome hut that was there, and I remember the welcome hut with painful memories, simply doesn't cut it for a community of that size. You desperately need a community facility. It's been helpful for the owners to clarify the position as they understand it on the football pitch versus the mugger. I was aware of the Tata Steel involvement. I wasn't aware of the swap because that happened after I finished here and went and worked elsewhere. But that is an area we need to explore further. We understand that. There are difficulties in some of the proposals as to how this is going to be taken forward. What I am going to recommend in a moment, and I have discussed it with the chairman who's kindly agreed, is that I need to advise all the members in closed session what the legal implications are for this, because again, going back to our previous speaker, this is not about a planning application. It is about really quite complicated legal issues relating to a legal agreement originally in 2006 and then modified on a number of occasions. What I'm going to invite to happen is that we have a discussion in closed session where I can give some legal advice to members, which obviously is privileged legal advice. We have seen the correspondence. I am grateful that one of the concerns that we had was whether JME would even meet the council's contribution to legal costs. My understanding is that has been clarified and they will. But there are other issues that we do need to look at. And then as soon as we've finished with that, and I hope it won't be very long, we'll invite you back in and we can then put some proposals together based on the matters that are in the report and some of the other issues that were discussed, if that's okay with you, Chairman.
Thank you. I believe we've got a room that members can go to, so members of public can stay here.
Okay.
I understand. So do I have
we'll leave you.
Can I just have members happy with that and a proposer and a seconder to go into? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Marks, seconder, Councillor Brown. And is everyone in favour? Thank you.
Can we invite Mr. White as our viability representative to come into that?
Start again. You give us a nod when we're... Thank you. And thank you for that short interlude where we took legal advice. Thank you to everyone who came along today and spoke. And we have heard things, so we did want to take legal advice on. And we are very concerned. We do want to make sure that Little Stanion get their community facilities. And there are things we want to look into. So the advice we've received is to defer this evening to look at a number of issues. And I'll pass over to Simon, the council solicitor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, we have looked at this. We have a number of issues that concern us. We think there might be some issues that will be of concern to the owners that they will need to go away and think about as well. But they are issues that we are quite firm on. And that's why I think we need to defer so that we can then have a further discussion on it. The deferral issues are that we are proposing to defer, to look at this issue around the football pitch stroke mugger issue, which you've helpfully explained to us. Sadly, I wasn't around dealing with the legals on that. I was enjoying myself working in East Hertfordshire at the time, so I don't know, but we will look at that. And we will also look at the issue around Tata Steel and why that was a problem in terms of selling the land. That's the first one. Right at the beginning, Mr. Young explained there were concerns around some of the trees and the landscaping issues. That's a further deferral point that we want to look at. The biggest one for us of these so far is the financing of the community hall. And now what we are saying is we want to find a way in which this can be brought forward, acknowledging the fact that this is going to take you a while to get to a point where you can let a contract. What we are currently looking at is that shouldn't be any longer than 6 to 9 months. And what we're looking at is that there would be financial contribution, possibly in the form of a bond, by that point that would then be triggered through a situation that no more than 50% of the remaining 99 properties can be occupied prior to that bond being in place. What the council is not prepared to do, and that came out very clearly in our discussion, and you'll see that when they come to vote, is they're not prepared to wait the full 2 years, which I know is what you were proposing. And then the final point of deferral is, in light of what we've heard from Little Stanion Parish Council, who've indicated a strong desire once that community hall is built to take on the management of that, there needs to be clear negotiation between North Northamptonshire Council and Little Stanion Parish Council to ensure that there is a clear agreement and way forward to enable that to happen that would satisfy this council, yourselves, and also the developers who'd be handing it over. So that is a piece of work that needs to be done. We are proposing that the bond that I've just talked about, that we are looking for within 6 to 9 months, would be a spec-based bond. So you would propose a spec for that community hall, and that we would approve that spec for that community hall, and the bond would be spec related. That's not an unusual way of doing a bond. We think that that would be the safest way in the current economic climate. I hope I covered all the points we talked about. I don't know if you want to move to the vote proposal.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members before we do? No, you're happy. Any comments officers want to make before we do? In that case, do I have a proposer to defer Councillor Marks and a proposer to second? I think that's Councillor Smythe. Sorry, seconder proposal. And all those in favour, please. Thank you. I think it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. You're welcome to stay, or I'm sure you've got other things you'd like to do on a Wednesday evening. Thank you. We're just waiting for Simon to come back. Thank you. So that leads us on to agenda item 5, Delegated Officers Report.
No report, Chair.
Thank you. And then that leads us on to urgent items, to consider any items of business for which notice has been given to the proper officer prior to the meeting and the chairman considers to be urgent pursuant to the Local Government Act 1972. And we do have one in front of us, item 6.1, November Charlie /23 /00330 Delta Papa Alpha, which is Willowbrook Health Centre, Cottingham Road, Corby. Members have that in front of them. And I think, Bob, you're taking this, Bob Young.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members. Just in terms of the front end of the report there, the reason for bringing this in front of you today is because of this scheme is dependent on NHS funding, and there's a very short deadline, so we have to bring it forward from the November committee to this one. We've also provided you with the pre-application discussion, so you can see there's been quite a bit of discussion with officers, site visits, and also a meeting. That included NHS representatives and their architects. Just in terms of housekeeping, as per the previous item, I asked the tree officers to have a look this is the location of the site on the display here, to see what the tree situation was. There's a lot of new tree planting going in, and the officer is quite satisfied that with the extra heavy standard trees, that would have a really positive effect on the site. There's quite a lot of planting down boundaries. Not many trees are in very good condition, to be honest with you. So trees are not a reason for, obviously in this case, for concern. Also in terms of ecology, there's been discussions with the ecology officer and the applicant's consultant, and there is a net gain of biodiversity. So members, I'm not going to go through the report. I think you've seen that as conclusions. We have tested against the various policies in the MPVF and local plan. So this is the location. So I'll start actually the start. 1,047 square metres. It's a diagnostic centre. I will show you the floor plans in a few seconds. With some infrastructure, access will be from Willowbrook Road. There's car parking, cycle spaces, and drainage, some drainage work, and hard and soft landscaping and utilities. This shows the red line area, so there's a health hub here. If I just move on, just give you a few seconds to look at that. If I move on to the satellite picture, you see the site area, you've got the Corby Community Hospital, the Nuffield Hospital, the Bupa Dental Care, Urgent Care and Lakeside. So you see there's a whole hub there of healthcare, and this will be a positive asset to Corby itself and to its local residents, including residents within the unitary itself. Just moving on, this is the site plan. So it shows the footprint of the building with the parking areas, and there's some cycle area parking in this location. And the relationship to the existing buildings, there's no serious impact on outlook from the existing buildings on the hospital hub. Moving on, design-wise, it's a timber panelling building, quite attractive. We have asked for a few changes during the pre-app. This area here is where the patients will come in, and they will sit there in quite a nice little environment, quite light. And then you have these side windows. There are lots of consulting rooms. I'll come on to that now. Apologise, it's a little bit difficult to, I'm not sure if I can make this bigger, but you can see the consulting rooms, and they have scanner rooms. So it's really like some of it's preventative in terms of healthcare. So it's a very important hub. Obviously, there's a large cost involved in getting the building and also the fitting out, and obviously employing staff, qualified staff and support staff. So that's the footprint. This shows the location. See a lot of boundary trees, as I mentioned earlier. There's some of the existing buildings, but there is a range of buildings here, which are single-storey, two-storey. So there are one or two trees which are not in good quality at the moment. That's been assessed by a tree officer. I asked him to go out and do a survey. In terms of other buildings, you see there's a mix there of there's some fairly featureless. Probably that's a substation. Then you've got some chalet-style buildings. There's a whole range there, as you can see. So just going back, the principle, we've obviously gone through the pre-application process. There have been some minor changes to the design. The layout scale and impact on the area is very, very minimal. We think it'll be very compatible with the existing hubs, health hub. There will be a lot of tree planting, 30 trees, heavy standard trees will be planted, which will help the biodiversity net gain, more than meeting even the government's requirements, which have been slightly delayed till January this year. Highways have no objection. Parking is acceptable. Sorry, just moving there. Ecology I've already mentioned, and there's not a high-risk flood zone in that area. So the actual, in terms of development plans, located in a sustainable location, it's near the community, a sort of existing health hub. The diagnostic centre will be a really good asset to the local community and the wider area. It does meet Policy 7 of the Joint Core Strategy, and we support it. So in terms of just finishing off then, really, explain the footprint of the building and the internal areas. You've got a reception and waiting area, some clinical areas, support space, circulation showers and changing facilities and toilets. And obviously that reception area I think is quite welcoming. I'll go back to that in a few seconds. Structural side, it's not a big building, it's 4.2 metres height. It's more of a modular design, so it could be built quite quickly. Then I'm just talking about trees. There will be some trees, but a lot of the trees within the middle of the site are not of good quality. And actually there's going to be 44 extra. So I said 30, but there will be 44. In terms of ecology, I think of the biodiversity net gain is 28. I think it might be slightly less than that, but it's still a very positive thing. Flood risk I've mentioned. I think before moving to approve, there was a badger set discovered on the site, on the eastern part of the site. It's not really like a fully used badger set, but obviously with European legislation still in force, the architects, the agents have been carrying out monitoring with their ecology consultant, and they'll have to be properly managed to ensure a safe relocation of any badgers that are still there. So on that basis, due to the apologise, I had to come sooner, but we've explained why. We're asking you to approve, subject to delegated authority, so we can now issue the decision within a timely, speedily as possible, to ensure that the funding, which is material consideration to develop the scheme itself, is actually in place. I think if it goes on for another couple of weeks, then I think it could be under threat. So we're asking for approval subject to conditions. There's a number of safeguarding conditions which are at the back end of the report. So I think that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we've got one speaker on this. I've got two names down, but Polly Grimmett, are you speaking? Yeah. Thank you. Sure, you've heard plenty of times this evening. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
That's fine. So good evening, everyone. I'm Polly Grimmett. I'm Director of Strategy at Kettering Hospital, and it's Kettering Hospital that are overseeing this project. So I thought what I'd just do is just give a little bit of context about what this facility is going to deliver for the community. So community diagnostic centres, in case people aren't familiar, are a national programme of work that Professor Sir Mike Richards, our cancer czar lead across the NHS, came forward with a plan. So I think there are over 50 now that are starting to get in development. And their principal aim is to increase capacity and reduce waiting times for patients to be able to get early access to tests, in particular around early diagnosis of cancer. Because, of course, the earlier you can get diagnosed with cancer, the much better your health outcomes are of getting treatment and survival rates. So for Northamptonshire, we submitted 2 cases, and the one for the North, we did quite a wide stakeholder engagement, including patients and residents throughout Northamptonshire, and Corby was chosen as the best site. In particular, because we've got such a high growing population in the north of Northamptonshire. And whilst you do have some healthcare facilities locally, there's not a lot, particularly considering the growing population. So a lot of the time, whilst you've got your urgent treatment centre here, a lot of the time, if you go to see a GP and you're referred in for cancer symptoms, you would have to go to Kettering Hospital at the moment. So, of course, people will either have to access their own transport and parking and have the inconvenience, or indeed be reliant on public transport. So the principle of this is that the centre would be open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, so people that have working lives or caring responsibilities can attend at a time that suits them. We'll have MRIs, CTs, things like heart scans, more blood tests will all be there, and you'll be able to go in and have a one-stop shop, we call it, for all of your tests, have an outpatient appointment and get your diagnosis principally on the same day or not long thereafter. So number of people who will benefit from this is over 50,000 appointments a year. We'll be able to prevent people in the local community from having to go to Kettering Hospital. So that's a huge benefit. And we're also working on plans with the local colleges and schools to develop local apprenticeships for school leavers so that the employment opportunities around this centre as well will be working with people. And we've actually got a community engagement event on the 18th of October, both face-to-face and virtually, to hear from anybody from Corby that wants to come along and tell us about their particular views, how they might want to engage to develop it more as a community asset, local gardening groups in terms of the landscaping, all those kind of things. So that's the plan. You mentioned the capital funding, so we've been awarded just over £13 million from Department of Health to build this. But I won't go into the intricacies of NHS funding, but there are time limits on when that money is available, hence why we're in quite an urgent need to hopefully get the planning application so we can get on and build it and open it at some point next year, hopefully summer next year, budget set depending, because of course whilst we will go through the process and follow the national guidance on how to move it, we need to monitor it and make sure that they don't come back. But all goodwill, hopefully it'll be summer next year that will be open. And that's all I was going to say, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I think you sum up perfectly why this type of facility is needed. Can I just ask, because I am aware that this was led to believe that this was going to be used for things like MRI scans, CT scans, things like that. Because if you need an MRI at the minute, you have to go to Kettering if you live here. Is there some sort of mobile MRI unit that comes around about sometimes? Is that correct? And how often does that come?
Yeah, so we do have various mobile units. We have a mobile CT as well that comes for lung cancer checks. But there are only certain types of patients that are well enough to be seen on a mobile unit. Not all patients can be. So because this will be a state-of-the-art fixed machine, all patients will be able to access those services. And as I say, we only do a few days a week on the mobile unit, and this will be 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you. Can you just remind members that the question should be about planning? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Addison.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I welcome this, and why wouldn't I? You know, it benefits all members of our community. Can you just go back to the plan? I wasn't sure, and I can't see on the plan I've got here. Yeah, the access to the site, is it going to be via Willowbrook?
Yes, hopefully you can see the mouse here.
Yeah.
This is the new access, so that's all to proper sight lines and has been approved by the highways.
Okay, and the parking's going to be?
Parking is in this location. I agree, it probably could have been marked out a bit better. And then this is the footprint of the building.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor DL.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have some serious concerns here about the lack of consultation on this proposal, and I think that can be seen by the very fact that we don't have any members of the public here. Why aren't members of the public here? Why has that not gone out to wider consultation, and why are the public not aware of it? Because I think if they knew that this was happening in Corby, people would be here and would be very interested in this, and I think this is a commendable project, no issues with it at all. But the consultations, this seems to have all been rushed through, and I feel like we're being asked to make a decision on something that is very scant. And I just want to give a couple of examples of that. In the report, it says that Corby Town Council have not made any comment on this planning application. They were only told on Friday, and they were asked to give their comments by Monday. You know, one working day, they were asked to give their comments on that, and obviously they haven't had time to submit anything towards that, but they have put an article in Northamptonshire Telegraph tonight saying that they are very unhappy with the lack of consultation of this proposal, and also as well, we don't have a report from the tree officer, from the ecologist, from the Wildlife Trust, from the Woodland Trust. Where are those reports? You know, I'm sorry, but it kind of, for something that is so, you know, massive and you know, a massive development, we have like a 10-page document, and in the consultation document that members were sent last week, there were actually concerns about the 21 trees that were going to be felled, and it actually said in that document that there was concerns about that, and that perhaps the actual design of the building could be looked at to save some of those trees. We don't have any information on what those trees are. Are they oak? Are they protected? You know, what are they? Because we just don't have that information in the pack. And I'm afraid I feel like I'm being asked to to approve something just because the NHS have got a funding deadline, but we are not being given sufficient information for something really what is quite serious. And I'm sorry to complain, but you can see how kind of passionate I feel about this. And the other thing as well, the car parking in that area is an absolute nightmare during the day. And the picture that was up on the board about the car park, that must have been taken on a Sunday afternoon or 5 o'clock in the morning, because the car parking around there is rammed. And what you'll have is people coming into this car park, and then you'll have people parking there for all of the other sort of buildings on the site, because there's just nowhere to park in that area. So that's my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
well,
do you want me to comment on that?
You can, but if I just say about the, obviously it is an urgent item, which why the Town Council had less opportunity to comment, and why the recommendations are what they are. So, but I'll pass over to Bob Young.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms, obviously, accept the, members' concern, but Corby Council, Town Council were consulted on the 3rd of September. So they have had, normally they might have anticipated this going in November. And then we did write to them again to say there was a meeting. So they have had time to consider it. I accept they haven't responded, but they have had a period of time. We've also consulted 34 neighbours in the immediate locality, because obviously, as the member said, concerns might be about parking and access. But Highways have actually applied all their tests in terms of parking standards, access, and the use, relating that to the use of the building, where patients won't be, it's not an overnight accommodation. This is like a daycare. And also looking at the sustainability, the location, it's near an existing health hub as well. In terms of the trees, our tree officer's gone out. There are quite a lot of boundary trees, but they're going to plant 44 heavy standard trees, which obviously are bigger than the sort of little whippet things that you see sometimes by the side of the motorway that take 10 years. These will develop quite quick, and we've also had our ecology officer, consultant, look into the biodiversity net gain. So there are, the planning balance is very, clear here. There's a very positive thing in terms of the development. And although it's been, obviously I accept a short time frame, I've also, I've consulted Natural England in terms of the badgers. So we have been doing things behind the scenes. I know it might seem that we haven't, but we have been working quite hard in the time frame that we've had to deal with those issues that you've raised. And there also, I would argue, Chair and Member, that there are a number of safeguarding conditions in there which we will work with the applicants and the NHS and obviously their architects to make sure that the landscaping is delivered. Sorry, I don't know what's happened there. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's been some confusion about the Town Council were informed about this committee on Friday rather than not being consulted on the application. As my colleague said, they were consulted. Sorry.
I'll make a suggestion. In dealing with other sites, I think what we can do is go through, have some discussion with Corby Town Council, either through MS Teams or in person, and talk through the safeguarding conditions and the issues that you've raised in terms of landscaping, to reassure you that there will be a comprehensive landscaping, that there will be biodiversity net gain on this site, and it's actually in excess of what the 10% was coming in November, is actually in excess of that. So I think we're happy to engage with the Corby Town Council in the next week to talk through the whole project, if that would reassure
Sorry,
you.
I just want to come back on a point, because in your own discussion document that we were sent last week, you raised concerns about the felling of the 21 trees, and you suggested in that document that there could be a different design of the building that protects some or nearly all of those trees. Now you're just saying, oh, it doesn't matter, they're okay, that they can be felled, you know, it's not a problem, we'll just plant some new ones. But in the document that I read at the weekend, there were concerns in that document about those 21 trees. And, you know, people deserve to know that those 21 trees are going to be felled and what type of trees they are. You haven't even given us that information.
Well,
did you want to come back, or you?
not really. I can't really add any more. I've
can't.
obviously explained the tree officers' comments, the ecology comments, and also about the consultation. So I think I can add.
Thank you. I think that's fine. Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I had the opportunity to watch the surveying going on from the hospital bed that I was in earlier on this year, when they all came round and they were surveying, and so I know the exact piece of land that you mean, and a lot of the trees around the boundaries are pines, as you will see. You might even see me looking out the window. However, whilst I welcome this and the facilities that it will bring to Corby, my concern is around the water, the Willow Brook, which runs really close, which is has a problem with private sewers in the area coming down and past it. So and they say about the foul water here and Anglia Water putting in certain things. Just want to make sure that that does happen, because this private sewer that comes off the Kingswood has caused lots of problems around the boating lake, around the Willowbrook itself, which is contaminated most of the time now. And I want to see something that safeguards that brook from any other contaminants that may come through. Thank you.
Did you want to come back?
Yes, I'll look into that. But I mean, there are conditions, and also the flood risk will be covered by. There's condition 20 actually. We're asking for a verification report on sustainable drainage systems, and then a maintenance plan. So we have got some safeguarding. In fact, we have three conditions, very detailed, in terms of like addressing the flood risk. And obviously, as the member said, in terms of the foul and water connections, those are dealt with under the, I think it's the Water Act, Part 24 as well. So there are other safeguards apart from the planning conditions. Thank you.
Councillor Best.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate there are some concerns around this, but I think there is no question that we, the area, the people we look after, represent, need this facility. And I think if there is any risk of it being not built at all or delayed because we choose not to approve it tonight, that will be unforgivable. We have to put the trust in our officers to make sure that any concerns we've got to take care of. But I would like to move that we approve this development tonight.
Thank you. Well, we have got quite detailed conditions, and thank you for those. I think it's it's a good report, and I really like the idea. I think it's a good facility for the local area, and much needed. So I welcome this application. So we have a proposer that planning permission be granted subject to delegated authority being given to the head of Place and Economy Services to issue the decision application subject to the conditions outlined in the report and satisfactory consultation with Planning Committee Chair and Vice Chair on highways, ecology and drainage conditions. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jelly, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? No. Councillor DL, No abstentions. Got everyone there. Thank you very much. Thank you. That takes us on to exempt items.
No items, Chair.
That leads us to the close of the meeting. Thank you very much for attending this evening, and good journey home. Thank you.